Hey everybody, Brett from Love Bats and the Belfry back for another video and a new horror vlog.
Welcome!
I have two reviews on this horror vlog here. Two that I just watched recently, so one is very old, one is pretty new. And let's cover the old one first. So the first one I wanted to cover on this video is The Funhouse. This came out in 1981 and it was directed by Tobe Hooper, most famous for Texas Chainsaw Massacre and fantastic movie. And so most of the time when you mention Tobe Hooper, that's one that people kind of perk up at because of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And wanted to give this one a watch. It's always been one that I've seen the cover of all the time, but I just never got around to seeing it. Ended up watching The Funhouse, and yeah, there's a reason why this one isn't really talked about all too much. It was fine. I wouldn't say it was like super awful, but it definitely is one that you're not really missing much if you don't see this one. It follows four teenagers, or like, young adults end up going to this carnival, and the main girl we're introduced to, her brother basically pulls this prank on her, where in the beginning of the movie you think like she's about to get murdered, because this movie basically, you could say it's paying homage to the original Halloween of John Carpenter's, because it does the whole like first person view of putting on the mask and having like the knife and such. To me, it's just like a blatant ripoff. It's like, you could say, yeah, it was paying homage to that, but it was just funny of like how like frame for frame it basically was like just a Halloween ripoff. And it fakes you out being like, oh, it's the brother being a total pervert to his sister because she was taking a shower at the time. But we're introduced to them, and then it flashes forward to the main girl of the movie meets her boyfriend and then meets up with two of their other friends, and they go to the carnival. And this is where they stumble upon a lot of different stuff here, and the movie takes its good sweet time getting going. Honestly, it really takes a long time until like things start happening where you're like, okay, things are not what they seem, and they're in kind of a situation here. Like, I want to say a good like first 30 minutes of the movie is just them walking around the carnival and just seeing different acts, and this is on like full display. And some of this, I'm like, I feel like these aren't actors, these are just people just being their carnival selves, and it does, yeah, it's pretty boring, honestly. I'm one that likes movies that take their time to get going, but with this, you could tell they were it felt like it was really stalling time to get a runtime of 90 minutes. And it definitely felt that way, because it was just kind of dragging on and on. But once they go into this fun house, they are basically trapped in here, and then the funhouse ends up closing down, and they're just trying to simply escape the funhouse. And what ensues is, some carnage and just some stuff that, is not really all that memorable or eventful. It's eventful for them, obviously, the situation they're in, but there's not much of a body count in this movie. And your main characters don't really start getting picked off until much later in the movie. There is one fairly cool, like practical effects. Like, there's one person in the movie that is the most memorable, because they're masked for most of the movie and they're dressed up as the monster from Frankenstein. And then once their mask gets removed, you're like, oh, I see why they were wearing a mask the whole time and didn't want to take it off. And they were pretty cool looking, I will say that. But they weren't a super memorable villain. I wouldn't say that this is one that's, among one of your best like antagonists that these characters you follow are trying to survive from. So yeah, it was fairly, not the greatest. I just don't have much to say on this, honestly. And it was funny because at the beginning of this movie, the main girl character says, like, can we go to the movies? I told my parents we were just going to go to the movies. And, you know, this whole situation, this whole movie wouldn't have happened if they just went to the movies. But yeah, it was funny how, like, the younger brother was, like, involved in this too. I don't know. It like, he just kind of snuck out of the house to go to the carnival, like, by himself. And yeah, he just didn't feel like he should have been by himself leaving the house to go to the carnival, because then he kind of gets wrapped up in the situation as well. And yeah, it's like the parents are just like super neglectful, like they just didn't care. Like later in the movie, they end up like, you know, finding the kid being just like held at this one place, and they just like go pick him up. And it's funny because at the Funhouse in the same like area, pretty much these four characters are just like suffering and like about to die and everything. But yeah, the kills that happen in this movie aren't like the most memorable. Honestly, this movie I'm probably gonna forget, you know, not long from watching it, which I literally just finished watching it. So I'll keep that review kind of short and sweet on this. So yeah, Funhouse, you're not missing anything. It's not among one that if you watch, you may get some enjoyment out of, but it's not like a total waste of time. But I would say the first 30 minutes, you can tell they're just really trying to buy time to almost get like a full length run time of a movie. And even towards the end of this movie, it feels that way too. I'm like, they're really like dragging out this final act a bit. So yeah, something to write home about. So yeah, unfortunately, Tobe Hooper, it's not his best work, but you know, there is always Texas Chainsaw Massacre. When you're watching a movie like this, you're kind of expecting, you know, a body count or people to get picked off, and in fairly creative ways, but they really aren't. It's like it's pretty typical, like, oh, someone got choked, someone got, you know, fell, you know, to their death, or someone just got killed by, you know, getting strangled. I don't know. It's just like, it's just so typical. But I'll leave it at that. And then moving on to a fairly new one is one that came out a little earlier this year, but one that I had heard the name of. I didn't really know much about it, but it did go on Shudder just recently, and that is called Oddity. And it has to do with these twin sisters, where one of the sisters actually ends up getting murdered one night when she is home by herself, and it's connected to her husband. It's one of his patients ended up escaping the asylum he works for and ends up killing his wife. Flash forwarding a year later, and the twin sister even says in the beginning of this movie that it's like, we're connected, like the twin sister and her are connected. The twin sister, who is, you know, still alive, she sells oddities at this oddity shop she runs, but she's blind. And it kind of goes from there. And so she ends up coming up to the husband's house to visit, and then she finds out that the husband like already has like a new girlfriend and everything. So she ends up having this one like chest being dropped off at the house, and it's like this wooden figure that's inside. And yeah, things go from there, and it's a bit odd, but I quite enjoyed Oddity. It was quite a fun time. This is one of those movies where I mention this type of stuff on the channel a lot, but it's like, I am a fan of slow burn type films, and I highly recommend this one if you are into slow burn type films. If you are not, I would say do not watch Oddity, because you probably will end up hating this movie. To others who watch Oddity, if they don't mind movies that go at like a snail's pace or have like a fairly good build up to a climax, some people might be on with this movie and then may not like the way it plays out. I wouldn't say this movie, you know, jumps the shark by any means. I don't think it does. And I was willing to buy a lot of the stuff in this movie, but I enjoyed the way that it did play out, and I liked that this movie didn't really have just like the character that's bad ends up getting their comeuppance in the end. In a way they do, but at the same time, it is like kind of realistic about it, where it's like, you know, sometimes people just do some awful things in the world and they kind of get away with it. And there's some people where it's like, you know, they still are paying some sort of price for it, even though they can go on living their normal life. And, you know, I'm not necessarily trying to spoil much of this movie, because I think if you're interested in watching this movie, it's definitely best not to know that much. But I did like the way it played out, and was kind of a fairly realistic way of it playing out. There are some stuff though, like there's one particular thing that got to me where I was like, okay, that's kind of a plot hole. I don't really see how you write your way around it. It kind of just like skipped over something like that. So I'll just leave it at that. Like, I'm sure some people who have seen this movie may know what I'm talking about, but yeah, it just kind of like skips over this one little like plot hole. You're like, but how would that work? Because I feel like this person would have been, you know, caught by, or like at least questioned by the police on this. So, but I really enjoyed Oddity. It was a lot of fun. I recommend it to people. I mean, this is definitely one that's on my list as far as like, I really enjoyed this horror film this year, and I wouldn't say it's like top tier. It's funny this year with horror, like most of the new horror films that have come out, I wouldn't say are like super grand, amazing, like you gotta see this movie type films, but all of them have been really solid, honestly. Like a lot of the ones that I've seen have been pretty solid. You always do get like a ton of bad ones that are very disposable. Honestly though, the worst one I've probably seen this year is The Strangers Chapter 1, but yeah, that kind of already has like kind of left my head, and I haven't thought about it since I watched it, so, or at least haven't thought about it since I reviewed it. But Oddity is a pretty decent one. I definitely recommend it. It's a good story, solid acting. If you like some blood, it's got some blood in it. It doesn't go super overboard with it. It's not like one of these like gory over the top movies. It definitely does have a fair amount of blood in it, like for good reason though. Like sometimes when someone does get killed, and like they're gonna bleed a lot, so I will at least put that out there. But if you want just a solid, good, slow burn story, just decent characters, definitely check this one out. I recommend it. The actual Oddity itself in the movie, the wooden like figure, he's pretty awesome. He's also pretty freaky. Oh, and random side note on this movie. I know a lot of people hate jump scares. There are a fair amount of jump scares in this movie. My general rule with jump scares is I don't mind them as long as what you have happening with a jump scare is something that is fairly freaky or actually fairly scary. I mean, that's subjective, but what you have on the other end of that jump scare is something that actually is trying to scare you, not just make you jump because it startled you. It's, you know, that is like the typical horror thing to do. It's like, oh, people are going to get bored by this, so we got to throw some jump scares in it where someone taps someone on the shoulder and it's like, and, you know, they freak out. And it's just like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. It's like, that's what bothers me, because it's like, would you go to a haunted house and then have someone jump out at you and be like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to startle you? It's like, no, when they jump out at you, they're trying to scare you. So that's my analogy. It's like, you know, if you have a jump scare, have it be something scary that's supposed to happen with it. So I will say that there are jump scares. I know people generally just hate jump scares anyways, but at least the jump scares you get in this movie aren't just like silly, just startled noises at you. So that's a plus. But yeah, if you're looking for more, you know, newer horror films that were pretty decent, Oddity is definitely a good one to check out. I recommend it. So, I mean, I've been talking for like 15 some minutes, but I'm going to leave it at that. This was Brett's horror vlog. I wanted to just talk about 2 of the movies I saw recently. Hopefully you all have enjoyed this horror vlog. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. I appreciate it. It really helps the algorithm, aka the worst thing on the internet. And subscribe to the channel if you enjoy horror stuff, because I'm doing horror stuff blatantly for the foreseeable future. I talked about on my last horror vlog how I pretty much was like, I do a lot of different stuff on this channel, but I kind of just want to focus on doing horror stuff, just kind of focus just on that. And that's kind of what has carried this channel for the last number of years. And plus, horror is like one of my favorite things in the world. So I love watching horror movies, so why not just focus on talking about those? So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in a future video. Bye.